In sample program 1 of Python, each of the input variables are string data type. When we say name is equal to input, college underscore major is equal to input, and salary is equal to input. These are string characters, string data types rather. So if I say input, open paren, you'll see the template. It says reads a string from a standard input. So that's a string of characters that we're entering. However, suppose I wanted salary to be a numerical data type. If I want salary to be a numerical data type, it's going to have to fall under the data type real or float. It stores numerical values only. And of course, it can be positive or negative, whole numbers, or even decimals. Next, we would have to tell the input statement to associate float function with that input. Then the user could enter a value, and the program would view it as a numerical value rather than a string of characters. So we're going to tell the computer to do that momentarily. Meanwhile, we're also interested in making sure that the way the data displays, it'll be set up in a particular manner. That's where formatting comes in. Formatting output affects the appearance of how the output will display. There is a special feature associated with Python called the F string. And in chapter 2, you will see that. So F strings are a special type of string literal that allows you to format the values in a variety of ways. There's also a predefined statement or function called the format function, which can also be used. In this course, we're going to actually use both of them. So if I wanted to change my statements to an F string, I can be very specific by saying F and then a single quote followed by a curly brace and then the object or what it is I want to format followed by how I want to format that. So that's what that means. Likewise, if I'm working with numbers, I may say F string, salary, colon, and I want the computer to display a floating comma, so I may say comma, followed by a dot or a decimal, followed by how much space I want to allocate. So in this case, or how many decimals I want to follow that number. And so we're going to show you how to do this using the Python. So what we're going to do, I added a line 14, and I'm going to duplicate pretty much what's at line 13, but I'm going to use the F string. So I use the reserved character F, followed by a single quote, followed by a curly brace. The curly brace, whatever is enclosed in curly braces, that represents one of the objects. I want the computer to display student name. I'm going to allocate 18 characters for that. So whatever is inside of these double quotes is going to get displayed literally. And we're saying, this is what I want to display, and this is how or how many characters I want to be allocated for this display. Next, name, followed by a colon, and how much space I want to allocate for that name to go horizontally across the screen. I'm going to change the college major to reflect using the F string, very similar to what we did before. Colon 18, followed by a curly brace, college underscore major, colon 20. curly brace, open, close, single quote, and close off. Okay, so what's different when you're looking at the string literal followed by a plus symbol and the variable? When you use F string, you have a little bit more control on how you want your output to look. That's called formatting. That's why it's called a special formatting string. You always specify what is to be done, followed by the high or the format specifier. But you'll notice that each of these objects are enclosed in curly braces, followed by the next object and how much you're going to allocate and the curly brace. Notice we eliminate having to concatenate in that particular manner. Likewise, when you're concatenating a string literal with another string literal, here we're just saying F string, curly brace, and let me add the double quote because that is a string literal we want to display the way I have it, followed by how much space I want that string literal to display. Curly brace, college major, colon 20. Now, last but not least, on this salary, we're going to get an error message if I'm not careful because I want the computer to display or allow the user to enter a numerical value. So I have to surround the input statement with a special function called the float. So it's going to take the input string, convert it to a numerical value. I also want to provide further instructions to the user and say, enter positive numerical values only. I'm going to now change line 18 so that I do F and I want to then place a colon here, followed by 18, curly brace. Remove the plus symbol and just put a curly brace here. Now, for the salary, I'm going to add a colon. This time, I want decimals to display and a floating comma. So I'm going to, for my format specifier. A format specifier is nothing more than a description of how you, as a programmer, you are describing and defining how your output should display. I want a comma to show up. I want a decimal to show up. And I want two places to the right of the decimal. And I want to specify that this is a float. Close my curly brace and a single quote. Okay, so I added an F string that's predefined, followed by a curly brace to separate each object. So we're separating each object, we're describing it enclosed with these curly braces, and we're also saying specifically how much space we're going to allocate or how we want everything to be displayed. Okay, so let's run the program. We'll enter a name, Michael Cunningham, and we're going to enter computer engineering technology. It says, what annual salary do you wish to or do you expect to earn after completing your degree? Enter a positive numerical value only. So I'll put in $61,899. And you'll notice I left those statements in there, the previous string print statements, so that you could see they're very similar. And so for expected salary, the computer automatically added a comma and a decimal, two places reserved to the right of the decimal. Initially, when you're working with functions, it can be very confusing. So you have to play around with it. It's easy to just write things out and kind of manually define string literals and whatnot. However, there are features that are built into the Python program that makes it easier for you. I'm going to delete those redundant statements. And now we have F string. Again, take a real good look at the reserved character F followed by a single quote. And you have your curly brace, which identifies the first object and how it's going to be displayed, and then followed by the second object. And you notice there's no concatenation or adding pluses to that, which makes it easier sometimes when you're using other built-in statements and functions. The one that you probably need to get more familiar with, and that seems to be a little bit more difficult, is when you're dealing with float values. And you'll notice I put in salary. I didn't specify how large or the number value would be, or place values it would have. But I did say add a floating comma, a fixed decimal, followed by how many decimal places I want to reserve. 2 places to the right of the decimal. And it is a data type float. That's what the F represents. Okay, so look at this and review your chapter 2 and play around with it until you become more comfortable with using the F string format.